All right, well, hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Steve Jorson with Northeast Metro Climate Action. We are a volunteer-run community organization with members in White Bear Lake, North Oaks, Matamidi, and Shoreview. Our mission is to raise awareness on climate change through events like this. We've been doing events like this for over 6 years now, monthly during the winter months, and then we get involved with other things during the summer. We also work directly with our state and local representatives. We have
one of the people.
and
This one?
to advance climate action on a policy level. We also participate in community activities such as
Can you go pay
Saturday,
attention?
March 8th, we are participating in the White Bear Lake ice
Go
cleanup.
ask me. Retreat.
And so that will be, we will be meeting, and anybody who wants to join us, we'll be meeting at West Park on the northwest part of the lake in White Bear at 10 a.m. There should be plenty of ice still out there. We're given our last few weeks of weather. We can go out and clean up. We have one section. There's a lot of different sections to be cleaned up. I have to mention that Northeast Metro Climate Action acknowledges we are meeting on traditional homelands of the Anishinaabe people who continue to live in this area and exercise their treaty rights. Tonight we are co-hosted by, we have a lot of co-hosts, Resilient Roseville, Vote Climate, Indivisible North Metro Environmental Team, the Climate Justice Team of St. Croix Valley, Indivisible, Sustainable Stillwater, and the Vadnais Heights Green Team. So we have lots of help tonight. Before I get started with tonight's event, I want to mention our March event will be an exciting one. We will be at the Maplewood Area Historic Center for a presentation on designing gardens and with native and non-native plants for climate action. Our presenter will be our own NEMCA team member, TJ Molaski. They have it's called the Bruntrip Farm, Heritage Farm that's right there on the site of the Maplewood Historical Society. And we'll be doing hands-on looks at some of these native and non-native plants. And that will be on Saturday, March 22nd at 11 a.m. And you can check our website for that tomorrow. Our website's down again. I've been having little technical issues. We have our IT team working on it, which happens to be my son-in-law who works for Google. We should have it up again tomorrow. Few housekeeping things. People online, please keep all your microphones on mute. And also, if you have any questions for our presenters tonight, put those into the chat and I will ask those questions to our presenters. And there will be a Q&A at the end of, there's two different presentations tonight. There's be Q&A after each one of those. But if you have a question in the middle, you can raise your hand, and if the presenters feel like it's a good time to stop, they can ask you can ask the question in the middle. Otherwise, we'll get your question at the end. So for tonight's event, it is food and climate change, and an organization that I follow, which is arguably the most well-respected scientific-based climate solution site, is called Project Drawdown. And Project Drawdown ranks all of the different climate solutions using scientific methods to figure out what's going to work best. Their number one priority for reducing carbon emissions and fixing our environment is reducing food waste. Yeah. So to say that our three presenters tonight are doing important work on climate change would be an understatement. So with that, I'll introduce Kaya Schlangen from Ramsey County, working with Ramsey County. She's going to be talking about managing food waste. Leslie McCollam will be with Ramsey County also, and she's going to be talking about food waste prevention. Let's not have food waste to begin with. That would be even better, right? And then Jalayna Smith-Moore from MN350 is a food justice organizer. We'll also be talking about food waste. All right. And with that, we will go ahead with.
Thank you. All right. Just gonna go to this. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for those who braved the cold and those who are on Zoom. We're excited to be with you here tonight to talk about food waste and climate change. I'm Kaya Schlungen. This is my colleague, Leslie. And if you were expecting Gabe Reynolds, he was going to be speaking tonight and he unfortunately couldn't make it. So I'm here on behalf of him. We both work for Ramsey County Environmental Health. My work mainly focuses on reuse. I run our Fix It Clinic program, if you've heard of it, as well as communications, and I do our Stop Food Waste Challenge that we run every August with Hennepin and Washington counties. And I'll let Leslie introduce herself quick too.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Leslie McCollam. I work with Ramsey Washington Recycling and Energy, and we work really collaboratively with both Ramsey and Washington counties. My work focuses on a few different waste prevention areas, but primarily food waste prevention. So I'll be talking about some of our work tonight. Thanks.
Can you both come closer to the little closer?
Oh, sure.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks. All right, so tonight we're going to do an overview of what is food waste, start with some joint definitions. How is it showing up in our waste stream? How is it contributing to climate change? And finally, what are the solutions, especially focusing on what work is Ramsey County and Recycling and Energy working on to manage our food waste that in both ways that support individuals and also more structural and upstream changes. All right, so there's a lot of ways to think about food waste. When you think about food waste, some of you might first think of those leftovers that went moldy in the back of your fridge, while others might start thinking about grocery store produce that never gets purchased. There's a lot of waste throughout the consumption and the production, and there's a few terms that you're going to hear a lot tonight, so I just wanted to give some definitions. Wasted food is an umbrella term that will come up a lot, and it's food that's not used for its intended purpose. We've also have excess and surplus food. That's the extra food that gets donated with a specific purpose to feed people. Food waste is simply food that wasn't ultimately consumed by humans, so it could get discarded or used in a manner of ways, but it wasn't eaten. And finally, food loss is that unused food product that's from the agricultural sector. So, for example, crops that were wasted or produce that wasn't picked. And these will just help us frame this conversation tonight. These definitions aren't completely inclusive, and all-purposing of food waste is a huge issue, but it's a good starting spot for us tonight. So when we look nationwide, we can see that about a quarter of our municipal solid waste that's sent to landfill is food waste. This is more than any other concentrated material that shows up in our waste stream. And so while there's a lot of food waste happening during the consumption end of food waste, there's also a lot on the production side in the food manufacturing and processing. So I just want to point that out quick, that 66 million tons of wasted food is generated in more of the consumption sector. But when we look back at the food being manufactured and processed, there's still a lot of waste happening there as well, with 40.1 million tons. And so this graph here shows three big sources of food waste consumption. We've got food retail at the top, and that would be your grocery stores or your convenience stores, food service in blue, restaurants usually, and households at the bottom in green. And so you can see that the majority of food waste from food service and households in the US is ending up in the landfill on the right. And in much smaller amounts, there's food waste that's going to animal feed, anaerobic digestion, composting, and other methods. One thing I just want to point out quick that I find really interesting is food retail at the top here actually has a significant portion of that food waste being diverted, and it's going to food banks to feed people, which, as we'll see later on, is a much higher use of that food than going into the landfill or being composted or any of these other methods. And when we narrow in more locally in our own counties, we'll see that these are about the same percentages as well. We have about 33% of our organics that's ending up in our trash that's going to Ramsey and Washington's Recycling and Energy Center. Our trash in these two counties isn't landfilled, it actually goes to an incinerator, but it's still about the same makeup with our food waste, making up about 20 to 25% of our total trash in our waste stream. And in 2023, all this waste equated to about 439,000 tons of waste, that was produced in Ramsey and Washington counties. So this pie chart here shows that breakdown from 2022 and those estimates, and you can see that organics in the dark blue makes up the biggest portion of that waste that we can find in our waste stream, with paper in dark green and plastic in that light blue following closely. And something interesting to note about waste in our two counties is that it's directly proportional to our population. Our two counties make up about 13% of the population of Minnesota, and we're also producing about 13% of the total waste in our state. So we can see that there's a lot of food waste happening, and there's a lot of different ways that it connects to climate change. As was mentioned before, food waste has been identified as one of the highest impact areas to reduce climate change related emissions. Project Drawdown, that was mentioned recently as well, they estimate that about 8% of our global emissions come from food waste alone. It's a complex system that requires intervention at every stage where food is being produced and distributed and consumed. And you can see with this graphic that waste is occurring throughout the entire process, from the soil all the way to the landfill. This process of food waste is connected, and there's energy that gets put into food and it's lost that ultimately contributes to those high greenhouse gas emissions. And so this next slide just kind of helps us reframe some of that and get some more context for those big numbers of food waste. One that really sticks out to me is in the bottom right corner, and it's showing what resources go into a year of food loss and waste in the US, and it equates to an area of agricultural land equal to both California and New York combined, which is really huge, and it's difficult to try to conceptualize and think about. And for me especially, I tend to think of, we have all this agricultural land that basically goes to waste because this food is being wasted at the same time that a lot of people in our communities and our country are experiencing hunger. And so the food that does end up in landfills equates to a lot of extra greenhouse gas emissions. So we mentioned a lot of those energy and those resources that are wasted when food is being transported, when it's being produced, but also when it doesn't get eaten and it ends up in the trash and ultimately goes to a landfill. It continues to contribute to climate change by producing these high greenhouse gas emissions. This graphic shows that wasted food causes almost 60% of methane emissions from municipal solid waste landfills in the US. Methane is a really highly potent greenhouse gas emission. And as municipal solid waste becomes covered by other waste in the landfill, it starts decaying under anaerobic conditions. That just means without oxygen. And in those conditions, it's producing a lot of methane. And landfills are our third largest source of human-related methane emissions in the US, and that's just behind natural gas and petroleum systems and enteric fermentation. And so you can see that if we were able to divert some of this food out of the landfills, it could help us tackle climate change by reducing those emissions. So we've seen that food waste is a huge issue. It's causing a lot of emissions that are impacting our climate and changing it for the worse. But what can be done to reduce food waste? The EPA has created a wasted food scale that ranks these methods of managing our food waste from most preferred to least preferred. And so we're always trying to find solutions that work us up further up that scale to give the food waste its highest possible use, so it's not going into a landfill. And so now we're going to transition into talking about how Ramsey County is managing food waste and give some examples of our programs and our initiatives. And we're going to use this wasted food scale from the EPA to kind of guide that discussion, so you can see where these efforts are landing on this scale. And we're going to start all the way at the bottom with our least preferred method, and that's sending food down the drain, putting it in a landfill, or incinerating it. So like I said before, your waste in Ramsey and Washington counties isn't going to a landfill, but it is being incinerated. And so it's all brought to the Recycling and Energy Center in Newport, where it gets processed into refuse-derived fuel, or RDF. That RDF is then sent to Xcel Energy plants, where it's burnt and turned into electricity. And so this is one of the least preferred ways to manage our food waste, because although we're capturing some energy from that process and we can use that electricity, we're still creating greenhouse gas emissions. So moving up the scale, we've got anaerobic digestion, and the Recycling and Energy Center is planning to build this facility. It's not currently built, but this AD facility would help divert a lot of that food waste and greatly decrease our greenhouse gas emissions that we're producing. So you can see that there's two on this scale. The one that applies to this facility is the one further up the scale that's using the digestate that's produced as a side effect. And so anaerobic digestion is simply breaking down of those organic materials without oxygen. And this facility would be designed to process 75,000 tons of organic waste annually. So that would be food waste and food scraps from residents and businesses. So this process is a lot more preferred than incineration because we're reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and we also create biogas and digestate. And the biogas could be converted to natural fuel, and the digestate would be used as a soil amendment. Continuing to move up, we've got composting, and the county supports composting with 3 different programs. And these programs have really moved and changed as the years have gone on and our capacity has been built and residential interest has increased as well. So we start with backyard composting, and our website has resources for residents who maybe have a backyard and are interested in composting in their own backyard to get started. We also offer a sale every spring where residents from Ramsey and Washington counties can buy a compost bin at a reduced price. We also have more than 20 food scraps drop-off sites between our 2 counties. So those work by residents showing up, grabbing a free compostable bag from the site. You can bring the bag home, fill it with your food scraps or your food waste, tie it off and bring it back to the site. You drop it off there, and those get picked up and brought to an industrial composting facility and turned into compost. And so a cool thing about this program actually is that some of that compost comes back to the county, and we have it at our yard waste sites in the spring and summer. So residents can pick up that compost for free and use it in their garden. So it's a cool full circle program. And then finally, we have our food scraps pickup program. This is our newest program, and it's a curbside option. So the goal with this really is to reduce those barriers for residents to be collecting their food scraps and make it more accessible for everyone to participate. And this is currently rolling out to Ramsey and Washington counties over multiple years. And I'll go a little further into this program. Yes.
What is the timeline for construction of the AD facility?
That's a great question. I think the tentative timeline is 2027, but that's pending funding. Is that right? Yeah. Perfect. Awesome. So our food scraps pickup program, our newest program, it's very exciting. This program uses bags that are specific to the program. They're more durable to withstand the transportation they have to go through. So residents will be able to order bags online. They'll be mailed to your house, and then you can simply use those bags in your household, fill them up with your food scraps, tie them off, and then you'll put them in your trash can along with your trash bags, and it's co-collected by your trash hauler. And so currently this program is rolling out as additional sortation capacity is added. In Ramsey County, the cities that are currently eligible are Maplewood and North St. Paul. And that's because they have direct hauler routes to the Recycling and Energy Center. And that's where we currently have these robots who are programmed, and they go on the conveyor belt and they're able to pick out those trash bags from the trash line. And so it's a cool program, and the rest of the cities in Ramsey and Washington counties will also have it available to them as this program rolls out. But what needs to happen first is we're working with those transfer stations to build out that sortation capacity so they can have these robots stationed at their transfer stations and they'll be able to sort out these food scraps bags. And also with the food scraps pickup program, there's no set date for the next phase of this that's been announced yet, but if you go to their website at foodscrapspickup.com, you'll be able to sign up to get new notifications on the program.
Did you happen to bring any of those bags? No, because they're heavier than the ones you get at the food
Yes.
scrapping, right?
Yes, yeah, the bags are heavier in this program than you would get at a store or even our drop-off sites right now. They have to be more durable so they can withstand the trash truck and getting to the MRF and getting sorted. So they are specific to this program. And then next, moving up this wasted food scale, we've got feed animals, which is more preferred over composting or anaerobic digestion. And there's two programs we support that have inroads with this. Our first is our school waste reduction and recycling grants. So with Washington County, we offer grant funding and technical assistance to schools who apply, and they can support waste reduction programming in the schools. And so what this can often look like is schools adding some food scraps bins in their cafeteria where there might be a lot of food going to waste from kids. And so once the food scraps are collected, they can either be composted or they're collected for a food to hogs program and sent to a farm to feed animals. And so these programs, working with these schools, is great to help divert some waste, but it also helps encourage these sustainable behaviors in kids at an early age that they can hopefully adopt and take into both their households after school and further on into their lives. The second program is our food waste diversion program. This is specific to Ramsey County, and we offer a licensing discount to our food businesses who have to apply for a food license if they participate in the program. So in participating with this program, they agreed to divert their food waste through one of three methods. They can compost it, they can donate the surplus food to a food relief organization, or they can send it to a food to hogs program to feed animals.
Is
So
the Barthold farm the only one that takes these scraps? Or are there other ones throughout the state?
Yes, yeah, there was a question about one specific farm. I'm not sure. Okay, yeah, and they are,
I believe
we believe so.
They're the only ones? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's 7 businesses currently participating in this program in Ramsey County, and we're always trying to incentivize and encourage more businesses to join. All right, I'm going to pass it off to Leslie now to talk a bit about our food waste prevention programming.
All right, see if I can speak up here. So we're up in the upper 2 tiers of the wasted food scale now. So Ramsey, Washington, Recycling and Energy, even though we're processing so much of the trash, ultimately, we want to work ourselves out of a job. We don't want to have all of this trash coming to us, especially if it's good food and things that could be used in other ways. So we have a lot of staff that are devoted to doing upstream waste prevention programming, including myself. And with Ramsey and Washington County staff, we've developed, or the 2 counties have developed, the solid waste management plan. So you can look up Ramsey County's solid waste management plan and learn a lot about how we're trying to improve upstream prevention of waste, as well as how we manage it downstream. So with those plans, there are many strategies that we have some guidance from the MPCA, and then we also come up with our own strategies by county on how we're going to address all of these challenges. And so some of the strategies for food waste prevention specifically focus on supporting prevention at all different levels. So in your household, in commercial businesses and organizations, at institutional levels like schools. So really trying to address every piece of where food waste is happening. We also have strategies focused specifically on food recovery or food rescue. So trying to get surplus edible food to people that need it. And there is a specific strategy devoted to working with schools around this, because we know there's a lot of good food that could still be eaten from schools. There's a lot of extra milk. There's a lot of things that that we can specifically do a better job of addressing. So that's one of our priority areas as well. We work with both county inspection teams, so folks that are going out and doing the regulation side of things, to also promote our financial support, so grants and programs that and technical assistance to businesses, so they know how to better reduce food waste, and they know what options are available for them. And then finally, and I know there are other strategies too. I just tried to pull out some of the primary strategies, but you can also look at those plans to learn more. Finally, providing regulatory and legislative solutions to support food donation and food recovery. And I think also just food waste prevention in general. This piece is more done by there's a group of organizations that work together. So it's Hennepin, Ramsey, and Washington counties have a legislative arm called the Partnership on Waste and Energy. And they really work on lobbying for better policy. So food waste is included as a priority in that policy platform. I'll talk about some of our specific programs that are coming out of these strategies. So we have one of the biggest programs I oversee is our food recovery grants. We offer $20,000 per organization twice per year to organizations that are helping get extra food, surplus food from businesses to people that need it. So a lot of these grants go to food shelves or food banks, other organizations that are serving our communities, and also to businesses if they need some extra equipment or they need, a specific type of staff support to help make this work happen. We've been able to support that work since 2021. Stop the Food Waste Challenge is, Kaya referenced it earlier. This is something that the counties work on together to engage residents and try to make sure that you have all the information about different ways to reduce food waste at home. So meal planning, like better arranging things in your fridge, how to take an inventory of the food you have at home, shopping tips, things like that. A couple of things that we're hoping to do this year that we've been building out for a bit are developing a resource kit for businesses around preventing and reducing food waste, and also working with public schools to develop a forum for them to help each other learn about ways to reduce food waste, improve food donation, and then providing technical and financial support for them to do that. And I do want to highlight too, we have a lot of partnerships with local farms and farmers markets as well. We've been able to provide a lot of funding for surplus food from farmers markets to get to people that need it as well, with sort of a subsidy for farmers to be able to make a little bit of money while also getting that food to people, making sure that all that wonderful, fresh local produce that we have in our communities stays in our communities and goes to people. And then also a partnership with the Good Acre. Their LEAF program provides technical assistance for emerging BIPOC farmers and really helps them learn how to better plan for their crops, to be as efficient as possible, to have some guaranteed purchase of the produce that they have, and purchasing that surplus produce from them so that they're able to have a sustainable livelihood. That food, then the surplus produce that's still great and healthy and local, goes to people that need it as well. So it's been great to be able to support our local food economy over the past few years. And just a few impacts from this last year. So the reason we focus so heavily, or have focused so heavily so far, on food donation and food recovery is because it has a really substantial impact on greenhouse gas emissions and reducing the risks of climate change. So we have the organizations we worked with recovered over 7.5 million pounds. It's actually more than that. It's closer to 8.5 million now that we've gotten more information.
Is that just Ramsey, Washington County, 7 point?
Yes. That is just in our counties. And that's not counting, you know, the organizations that we haven't funded. So there's a lot, you know, a much larger.
That's
footprint
amazing.
that's
Thank you.
happening. You're welcome. And I did some calculations. There's a great website called ReFed. It's an organization that focuses on the whole problem of food waste. You can learn everything you could want. They manage a lot of national and statewide data, but they have a great tool for being able to calculate the climate impacts of food waste prevention. So through this, just with the 7.5 million pound figure, we've been able to reduce close to 3,700 metric tons or 880 cars taken off the road for a year. It's tons of greenhouse gases emitted that we've prevented, you know, preventing 5 million gallons of water being used, and funding, the funding that we've provided specifically has reduced over an additional ton beyond what these organizations were already doing. So each year when we're providing this funding, it's helping grow the amount of food that is getting to people and not going to waste. And then I do want to mention too, even though we're focused on climate change, this just in the organizations that we've worked with, over 430,000 people in our counties have accessed food through these programs as well. And it's really making a substantial impact on hunger in our communities. All right, I'll pass it back to Kaya.
Okay, so the final ways that the county is addressing food waste is through our strategic planning. So I wanted to mention two of our plans that go in conjunction with our solid waste management plan, because these issues around food waste and climate change are not solved easily and definitely not solved alone. And so by better enabling and supporting the work of organizations who are already in these issue areas while taking on our own initiatives as well, Ramsey County can better address issues and also lean into community knowledge that's there. And so our climate equity action plan came from heavy input with our communities, and it calls out food waste as an area that requires intervention. So as county leaders direct work, this plan will be continuously consulted. And I want to end by talking about our food security plan. We've spoken a lot about food waste tonight and the impacts of climate change, but the other side of that coin is food security. And the question of how can there be hungry people in our communities when so much food is going to waste, and is a product of our own failures to effectively and equitably manage our food systems. And so our solid waste management plan that guides our work and environmental health is aligned with both our food security strategic plan and our climate equity action plan. And we have a shared priority policy that calls for preventing and managing food waste, working toward food security for all while reducing greenhouse gas emissions and conserving resources. So I think it's important to keep food security in this conversation so that we can continue to try to find inroads to collaborate and work together on these issues that are all connected. Thank you all. That's our presentation.
Susan, any questions
Yes.
for Kaya? And make sure you repeat it.
Yeah, so on the tipping scale, I'm assuming that building an AD is extremely expensive. Why are we not investing more on the other side where there's more impact on the preferred, such as, you know, more in composting, more pickup sites, getting these transfer stations, robotics sooner? Why are we not making those investments more significant?
Okay, the question was around funding at different parts of the wasted food scale. Sorry if I'm not repeating this well. And why we're prioritizing funding towards anaerobic digestion, which is really expensive, versus more infrastructure for food scraps pickup program and other parts of the food scale. So these are part of the same equation. So currently the way that, and I may not be ultimately the best person to answer this too. This is something that I could elevate to other folks that do more of the AD work with our organization. But my understanding is that there currently is not full capacity in our compost the compost processing centers within our geographic area to process all of the food scraps that would be coming in. If we had everyone have access to food scraps collection programs today for composting, and anaerobic digestion is where that capacity would come from. So that's a big piece. They're connected. And there is a substantial amount of money going into making this pickup program function. There's a lot of money and time and people supporting the work to roll out the food scraps pickup program and work with the transfer stations to make it happen. Some of it is just a matter of timing and getting other people on board that are beyond just our organizations, and getting funding in place to help support that work. So it's not cut and dried, but I think there always is room for more investment in other parts of the food waste prevention scale. So and some of that comes down to legislative support. A lot of that comes down to, is there statewide support? Is there national support for it? So we're trying to use the resources that we have available, and that will obviously vary from time to time. So that's my understanding of it, but I'd be happy to get an official statement from other folks with my organization too.
And you don't need to repeat this one because I got it. But of the 8 million pounds of food that is diverted, that doesn't end up in the waste, do you know ballpark, like what percent of all the food waste is being diverted? Is it, 10%, 20%? Or is it a bigger number than that? Do you have any idea, of all the food waste, the 8 million pounds, what does that make up?
I don't think I have a good sense of that. If we're talking, are you talking about the recovered food?
Yeah.
I don't have a great estimate of that because
We don't have what our
Yeah.
total food waste is in Ramsey County?
not not in terms of recoverable food. That's where it gets kind of murky.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
I think I could get a number on weight of food waste based on the last waste characterization study that our organization has done, but that also includes a lot of other, that's a lot of food scraps and other things that can't be eaten. So
Yeah.
that's a little harder to ballpark.
Okay, all right, thanks.
It was one of your first slides where you had like landfill and different things.
Yeah.
I think like the first one was like, I'm thinking it's garbage disposals, water treatment or, that. Sewer wastewater treatment, and it's household. Okay, so that is just normal showering stuff, or is that like garbage disposal? I'm thinking like, that's never talked about. Do people like put that together? Like they probably shouldn't use their garbage disposal a whole lot. But like what portion would that be? I mean, it's food in the waste stream, so then it's food actually in the sewer, and it's that big. I mean, that's as big as an inlet. Or maybe I'm
That's the little box.
It's with that little.
But it's as big as compost.
Yeah, I'm not, the question was about that composition of the sewer wastewater treatment piece of that household contribution to food waste. So I'm not sure on the percentage of that. We could get that information, but I do know this has been mentioned in a few national calls and conversations lately that there is a fair amount of methane emission happening between someone's sink. It is the in-sink food, sorry, you said the word, but the food disposal, yes. The food that you're disposing of in your sink is what they're talking about. And there is methane emitted between the it going down the drain, getting to the sewage treatment facility and coming off of that wastewater treatment, as far as I understand. So it's still contributing to the problem, but yeah, it's not talked about often. I have only heard about it on very specific calls about food waste, and I don't think the general public hears about that.
Okay, there we go. Hi, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk more about food waste, but also food justice and how climate justice relates to food waste. My name is Jalayna Smith-Moore. I'm the food justice organizer at MN350. Let's see. Okay. So to start off, just going to talk more about who MN350 is. So 350 is like a global organization that deals with ending pollution that damages our climate, speeding the transition to clean energy, and creating a just and healthy future for all. And so MN350 is the Minnesota chapter of that organization. We have various areas of focus. So there's transit that deals with mainly blue line displacement, food justice, which is my work and what I'll be talking about today. We have our transportation team. They deal with a lot of electrification of school buses. Our policy action team, they do a lot of our endorsements, legislative things, lobbying, and then our missing and murdered Indigenous relatives team, they deal a lot with how climate change disproportionately affects Indigenous communities. So yeah, that's kind of the overview of who MN350 is. And so the work that I do, there we go, has to do a lot with justice in food systems. So I started in July, and prior to then, no, yeah, we were the food systems team. And so we decided to change that to justice to really hone in on that climate justice theme. So climate justice, if you're not familiar, just really aims to recognize how marginalized communities, BIPOC communities, low-income communities are disproportionately affected by climate change while they don't actually contribute the most of those issues. So they're contributing the least and they're getting the brunt of the effects of climate change. So when we're thinking about food systems and justice, what we think about a lot has to do with food access. So this has to do with people being able to get to where food is, being able to get back safely. It also has to deal with it being affordable and on top of that being healthy. So a lot of the time, food justice deals with addressing issues such as food deserts or food swamps where people are able to get food, but that food is not nutritious and the food isn't making them feel better, making them feel healthier. With food waste, that also ties into landfill locations and how historically there's been a lot of racist sort of zoning codes that have put landfills in marginalized communities. And so from that, they're suffering more health complications from things like fumes, how they spoke out in the prior presentation. So fumes from incinerators, the methane that comes off of food waste. And then another aspect of that justice and food system has to do with the rights for farmers and for workers. So that's talking about from the production of our food all the way to who picks up our food. So the workers at every single aspect of that. There we go. So, talking a little bit more about the impacts of food waste, the prior presenters did a really good job of going over that. So I'll give another mini spiel about it. But like they said, food loss and food waste contribute 8 to 10% of all greenhouse gas emissions. And this is contributed a bunch of facets of how food is produced. So waste of natural resources, so the water that goes into it, especially with big ag, so the energy to transport it, all of that. The increase of methane emissions, which methane is 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So while it may stay in the atmosphere for a shorter amount of time, it's actually trapping more heat and exacerbating the effects of climate change. And then also there's that degradation of land, which is a really big part, especially in big ag. So when food is produced and wasted along the way of that production, a lot of the time they're clear cutting forests. There's a lot of pesticide runoff in our water systems. And on top of that too, when people put monoculture agriculture on pieces of land, it also degrades that soil and that soil loses its nutrients. So even if you wanted to then take that back, it's really hard to get it back to a point where you can then grow nutritious food on it again. And so when we're talking about food justice and food waste, one way that MN350 is trying to combat food waste, specifically in Minnesota, is through the Clean Plate Club. So Clean Plate Club is just a group of restaurants that are combating climate change by trying to keep nutritious food out of landfills. So it's through prevention, donation, composting scraps, things like that. So when we're thinking of who's going to be a Clean Plate Club member, we kind of look at a certain set of criteria. And so the main one is that food waste reduction piece. So as was mentioned before, prevention is the most important one, finding ways to make sure that food waste doesn't happen in the first place, reusing it, donating it, and then composting at the end. But more than anything, trying to make sure that it stays out of those landfills where it's going to produce the nasty methane gas. And then something that we added recently as I came onto the role is trying to also look at it through a climate justice lens. So thinking of how these businesses are investing in their communities, thinking about how their food is impacting the people around them, and then also like uplifting equity for their workers, things like that. And so today I brought a couple of the Clean Plate Club spotlights that we've had. So first here's Carl Johnson. He started Storehouse Grocers in St. Paul in 2019. And Storehouse Grocers is a scalable grocery store, so they do their best to keep prices as affordable as possible. And on top of that, they also have a coffee shop there. So with food waste prevention, something that they do is that Carl's really good about talking to people about shelf-stable foods, which is a really big part, I think, of food waste, is that food labeling is just so difficult and it's really misleading a lot of the time. So it'll say like best by date, like expiration date, things like that. And so people are throwing away a bunch of food that they don't need to be throwing away. So Carl's really good about talking to people about that. And then also on the composting end, they actually donate free of charge their coffee grounds to either people in the community that have community gardens or also BIPOC farmers. And those coffee grounds are really good for like pH balance in the soil, which is really great. On top of that, with that climate justice aspect of investing into communities, what they do at Storehouse Grocers is that they have this social kitchen fellowship. So they actually take on people from the ages of 18 to 30, which is about 5 years older than most programs do in Minnesota. And they teach them these sustainable practices in the food industry. So a chef comes in and volunteers their time. They learn basic kitchen skills. They get 120 hours, and then they're able to go out into the food business world and implement these sustainable practices as kind of a ripple effect, which is really great. And then we also have Dan from Butter Bakery. Dan has been doing work in sustainable food business practices for nearly 2 decades. He's really awesome. He does amazing work. And then sort of the same thing. So Dan used to be an educator in environmental education. So he really tries to implement leave no trace. So the same practices of composting food, using compostable cups, things like that. But also he's really he values the prevention aspect of it too. So they keep track of all the food that they produce in a spreadsheet, make sure that they're only ordering what they need to use, because as was said before, prevention is really the most important thing. If that food isn't there in the first place, then we don't have to worry and use all our resources to try to figure out how to dispose of it and the best ways to not increase the effects of climate change. And also Dan plays into the ripple effects of raising up the new workforce in terms of these sustainable practices. He works with the Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative to employ youth, and they also learn all the practices about how to manage money, but also how to manage food resources in a sustainable way, which is really great. So thinking about the future of Clean Plate Club, what we really speak about a lot at MN350 is wanting to make it as more of a statewide initiative. So right now it's very Twin Cities focused. MN350 is based in Minneapolis. So ideally reaching restaurants that are in Duluth, St. Cloud, Rochester, trying to hit more of the hubs. Again, I would think that consumer involvement is really important too for the future. While these businesses can exist and be trying to mitigate their food waste, they can't really prosper and stay there if people aren't voting with their dollar there. So trying to get people more aware of Clean Plate Club members, both as an incentive for people to want to join Clean Plate Club and want to be more sustainable because they see it's something that people care about. But also just to get the consumer more involved in knowing that their dollar matters and it matters where you spend your money and that you should be thinking about these food waste practices not only when you're home, but also when you're eating out. And then ultimately too, we would want to do more garden collaborations. So right now we're in the works of speaking with Twin Cities like community gardens to see how we can also be a player in that collection of food waste from restaurants and then getting it to community gardens to be put back into the soil through composting. So yeah. If you wanted to get involved with MN350 at all, we are a volunteer-led organization. So if after both of the presentations today, you're feeling riled up about food waste or food systems, that QR code is the sign up. And then also I have my contact info up there as well. And if you just visit the MN350 website and go to the Clean Plate Club page, you can see all of the restaurants that are committed to mitigating their food waste if you wanted to support them as well. And yeah, thank you.
Right. Any questions for Jalayna? All right. Before we see if there's any final questions, I just want to give Owen Small, he would like a couple of minutes to talk about the Rise and Repair Rally Day. Owen?
Certainly. Question, can I share from this computer just for the slide?
I need to make you a host.
Okay.
Hang on.
So I'll do that in the meantime. I'm wondering, I'm gonna pass out some of these cards, I think, and Kate, does you with some of your names?
I just had one.
Okay. Owen, you're now a co-host if you want
I don't
to.
have enough for everybody, so we're gonna have to share a little bit of information on there.
And you can hit share screen.
I'm just gonna put that up there, I think, and I'm gonna drop a note in chat. I know we're short on time. I'm gonna keep it brief. So hello, everybody. My name is Owen Small. I'm an organizer with the Rise and Repair Alliance, which has been focused on climate justice and indigenous rights and sovereignty inside Minnesota politics, specifically on the legislature. And I'm going to talk about two things. We have a rally that's coming up on March 12th, and everybody here is invited. The Northeast Metro Climate Action and Kate has been very active in just being a part of this alliance space. So we have a full kind of day of lobbying and legislative visits scheduled for the 12th. And so that QR code on the right will RSVP for that. And obviously we're here talking about food and climate. And so there's some information on that card that I passed out. But one of the things that is a priority of this alliance this year is protecting wild rice, what's known as Monoman for the Anishinaabe people, and Pasine to the Dakota. And so when we think about food and climate and these types of things, right, this is a food that pretty much only grows in this region in northern Minnesota. It used to historically be all over Minnesota. It surrounds the Great Lakes. And it's the Minnesota state grain, right? And it's also something that requires absolutely zero fertilizer, zero anything except for clean water. So one of the things we've been doing this year is organizing to protect Monoman Pasine. We've been working with each of the 12 federally recognized tribes on legislation, ways that we can protect Monoman in our state. And so Senator Kunesh just introduced a bill. It's Senate File 1247. And we are kind of doing an effort right now to encourage people to reach out to our legislators to protect Monoman Pasine. So if you follow that QR code that's on that handout there, and it's also on the left up on the screen share, I think I also dropped the link in the chat. It's like a really simple form that you can just fill out with your address and it'll automatically send a form, like a letter, to your legislator. And what we're trying to do right now is just elevate the profile of wild rice. It's under threat through invasive species, through climate change, pesticides. I know we all love our boats and we probably have cabins, but you know, we wouldn't be driving our cars through a farmer's field, right? So there's some like things that tie in a little bit of like awareness around like, hey, don't drive your motorboat through a natural stand of wild rice. So I know we don't have a lot of time, but I'm going to put these things out there. Everybody here is welcome to RSVP and join us at that rally date. And then we hope that you'll take some action on behalf of wild rice. So thanks. And I'll stick around for a second, folks have questions, but appreciate you welcoming this time. Yeah.
Thanks, Owen. Any questions for any questions for any of our speakers? Any additional questions? Judy?
That are participating in programs you mentioned.
The question was, can we get a list of the schools? Can we,
Where is it on the
Answer.
website?
So, are you talking about schools that are currently participating in currently schools are all
The
schools
food
that,
hogs you mentioned.
yeah, Food to Hogs, I can get back to you on that one. I'm not sure who holds the list of those, but I can find access to that.
so our state senator, Heather Gustafson, is sponsoring a food waste bill. All right, and she's trying to get that through, and it has to do with the food, the schools. So we'd be interested in any information you have on that. All right, any other questions for any of our speakers tonight? All right, well, thank you all for joining us tonight. It was a great, let's give another round of applause for our speakers. Very informative. All right, thank you very much. Thanks to everyone online. And we'll be signing off now.
So.